All of those, we've said this many times, but each of those letters individually means so much and should be worth a lot to a lot of people. But when you stick them together, it creates this toxic soup where you can just hide the cheese. There's about $2 trillion of debt owned by the developing world that has been classified by a nonprofit, the Nature Conservancy in this case, as eligible for what they called nature swaps. So this is 2 trillion of the umpteen trillions of debt that's about to get defaulted on by countries like Belize, Ecuador, Sri Lanka, Seychelles, you name it. And what happens now are the big bulge bracket Wall Street banks and the Nature Conservancy goes to these countries and says, listen, you have $1 billion tranche of debt that's about to go upside down, and you're going to be in default with the IMF. We'll let you off the hook. And, we will negotiate with those bondholders to give them 50 cents on the dollar. But in return, you have to promise to take some of that savings and, protect the rainforest or protect a coral reef or protect some mangrove trees. All sounds good. Except then what these folks do is they take that repackaged debt, they call it ESG, they mark it back up, and then they sell it to folks like BlackRock, who have decided that they must own this in the portfolio. So it literally just goes from one sleeve of BlackRock, which is now marked toxic emerging market debt, and then it gets into someone's 401k as ESG debt. Isn't that unbelievable? A complete scam.
Yeah.
All of those, we've said this many times, but each of those letters individually means so much and should be worth a lot to a lot of people. But when you stick them together, it creates this toxic soup where you can just hide the cheese. I would put deals into two categories. One is easy and straightforward. And then two is, cute by half or, the too hard bucket. This is clearly in that second category. But it doesn't mean
Why
that
is it in that category?
Well, it doesn't mean that it won't work. In our group chat with the rest of the guys, one person said there's a lot of complex law when you go from a nonprofit to a for-profit. There's lots of complexity in deal construction. The original investors have certain things that they want to see. There may or may not be, legal issues at play here that you encapsulated well in the last episode. I think there's a lot of stuff we don't know. So I think it's important to just give those folks the benefit of the doubt. But yeah, if you're asking me, it's in the too hard bucket for me to really take seriously. Now, that being said, it's not like I got shown the deal, so I can't comment. Here's what I will say. The first part of what Zach said, I think, is really important for entrepreneurs to internalize, which is where can we make money? The reality is that, well, let me just take a prediction. I think that Google will open source their models because the most important thing that Google can do is reinforce the value of search. And the best way to do that is to scorch the earth with these models, which is to make them widely available and as free as possible. That will cause Microsoft to have to catch up, and that will cause Facebook to have to really look in the mirror and decide whether they're going to cap the betting that they've made on AR, VR and reallocate very aggressively to AI. I mentioned this I did this Lex Friedman podcast, but that should be what Facebook does. And the reason is, if Facebook and Google and Microsoft have roughly the same capability and the same model, there's an element of machine learning that I think is very important, which is called reinforcement learning. And specifically, it's reinforcement learning from human feedback, right? So these RLHF pipelines, these are the things that will make your stuff unique. So if you're a startup, you can build a reinforcement learning pipeline. How? You build a product that captures a bunch of usage. We talked about this before. That data set is unique to you as a company. You can feed that into these models, get back better answers. You can make money from it. Facebook has an enormous amount of reinforcement learning inside of Facebook. Every click, every comment, every like, every share. Twitter has that data set. Google inside of Gmail and search. Microsoft inside of Minecraft and Hotmail. So my point is, David's right. The huge companies, I think, will create the substrates. And I think they'll be forced to scorch the earth and give it away for free. And then on top of that is where you can make money. And I would just encourage entrepreneurs to think, where is my edge in creating a data set that I can use for reinforcement learning? That I think is interesting. That's kind of saying, I buy the ingredients from the supermarket, but then I can still cook a dish that's unique. And, the salt is there, the pepper is there, but how I use that will determine whether you like the thing or not. And I think that, that is the way that I think we need to start thinking about. But we're building silicon for machine learning. That's different.
Right. But it's based on TensorFlow.
No. The founder of this company was the founder of TensorFlow.
Oh, got it. Okay.
No, sorry, not of TensorFlow, pardon me, of TPU, which was Google's internal silicon that they built to accelerate TensorFlow.
Right.
If that makes sense.
And so that's I don't mean to be cynical about the whole project or not. It's just the confounding part of this, of what is happening here. It reminds me, I don't know if you remember this.
The biggest opportunity here is for Facebook. I mean, they need to get in this conversation ASAP. I mean, to think that, look, PyTorch was like a pretty seminal piece of technology that a lot of folks in AI and machine learning were using for a long time. TensorFlow before that. And what's so funny about Google and Facebook is they're a little bit kind of they're not really making that much progress. I mean, Facebook released this kind of rando version of AlphaFold recently. It's not that good. I think these companies really need to get these products in the wild as soon as possible. It cannot be the case that you have to email people and get on some list. I mean, this is Google and Facebook, guys. Come on. Getting about
next tasks. This was an incredibly powerful display in a 1.0 product.
I was thinking about what you said last week, and I thought back to the music industry in the world of Napster. And what happened was there was a lot of musicians, I think Metallica being the most famous one, famously suing Napster because it was hey, listen, you're allowing people to take my content, which they would otherwise pay for. There's economic damage that I can measure. That legal argument was meaningful enough that Napster was shut down. Now, there were other versions of that folks created, including us at Winamp. We created a headless version of that. But if you translate that problem set here, is there a claim that Yelp can make in this example that they're losing money? That, if you were going through Google or if you were going through their app, there's the sponsored link revenue and the advertising revenue that they would have got that they wouldn't get from here. Now, that doesn't mean that ChatGPT can't figure that out, but it's those kinds of problems that are going to be a little thorny in these next few years that have to really get figured out.
This is, have to note that.
The other gray area that isn't there today but may emerge is when Section 230 gets rewritten. Because if they take the protections away for the Facebook and the Googles of the world for being an algorithmic publisher and saying an algorithm is equivalent to a publisher, what it essentially saying is that an algorithm is kind of doing the work of a human in a certain context. And I wonder whether that's also an angle here, which now this algorithm, which today, David, you said the example, I read all these blog posts, I write something. But if an algorithm does it, maybe can you then say, no, actually there was intent there that's different than if a human were to do it? I don't know. My point is very complicated issues that are going to get sorted out. And I think the problem with the hype cycle is that you're going to have to marry it with an economic model for VCs to really make money. And right now, there's just too much betting on the come. So to the extent you're going to invest, it makes sense that you put money into OpenAI because that's safe. Because the economic model of how you make money for everybody else is so unclear.